Welcome, I'm Carl Tape. We'll be discussing the basic structure of the Earth. Here's a picture of that. It's a cutaway of a portion of the Earth. And we basically see that the Earth is described by concentric shells of material. 5 parts from the inner core, outer core, mantle, asthenosphere, and lithosphere. Listed here, it's from top to bottom. We have the lithosphere, which is the plate, the rigid part. The asthenosphere is this weaker material that the plates are on top of. It actually is a key part in enabling plates to move. The mantle is the big one shown here. And then there's the core of the Earth, which is represented by a liquid outer core and a solid inner core. And we know these properties thanks to seismology and how waves that emanate from earthquakes near the surface go into the Earth and come back out to the surface at other parts. And we can use that information to actually determine what these properties are. So these are the 5 parts of the Earth. Another view of this, just showing the cutaway, the crust, part of the lithosphere. Then there's this asthenosphere, stiffer mantle, liquid outer core, inner core, solid. If we look in Wikipedia under structure of Earth, we get a pretty complicated picture. And we're going to just extract a part of this picture in understanding kind of where these boundaries are and what the properties are. So here's our 5 parts of Earth: lithosphere, and it's shown here, upper 80 kilometers or so. The depth will vary as it shows below. Asthenosphere, mantle, outer core, inner core. And we should get a basic idea. You know, the Earth is 6,370 kilometers. The radius is that. And so when we think about depth down to the center, this is listing the depth from the surface going down, what would be the approximate base of this layer. And you can see that the mantle makes up a lot, but a lot of the very exciting and interesting things, such as with plate tectonics, the plate is the lithosphere, and it sits on top of a relatively thin layer of material that is weak and deforms and enables really plates to move, while the mantle is this basically convecting rock material. But for now, we're just trying to understand what these structures are. And frankly, we should think of the outer core, this liquid iron, that gives rise to our magnetic field. So when we talk about magnetic stripes or the Earth's magnetic field changing, that activity is really coming out of the outer core. We also want to understand that the lithosphere, which is a plate, is the crust, could be oceanic or it could be continental, as well as a portion of mantle. So sort of a rigid part of the mantle stuck to the crust makes up lithosphere. So again, back to this picture, thinking of the 5 parts of Earth. When we think of the lithosphere, we want to focus on this top part, and we can see that the diagram is also trying to illustrate continental crust and oceanic crust. So that's another distinction that is important for us in understanding what we see on the Earth and even in the Alaska region. So lithosphere is crust plus lithospheric upper mantle. Shows here crust and uppermost solid mantle shown in this diagram. So there's 2 types of crust: oceanic, continental. And really, that doesn't mean that, you know, they aren't decided based on coastlines, but in the deep part of the ocean, those are ocean crust. And we'll look at a map here. So here we have another picture of these 2 types of crust, just kind of a cartoon sketch. oceanic crust is thinner. It's under the sea usually. But you also have shallow seas that are above continental crust, and continental crust is generally thicker. And here we see them both attached to some mantle, lithospheric mantle, and this would all be sitting on top of some asthenosphere. So if we look in the Alaska region at the topography and bathymetry, it's a reminder that when you remove the coastlines, you see, for example, this red region this is all continental crust of North America plate. Here, this is all continental crust. So even though out in the Bering Sea, it doesn't mean that you have oceanic crust. You can see, in fact, there's quite a remarkable divide, this break between continent and the ocean. So this would be oceanic crust of the North America plate. This would be all oceanic crust of the Pacific plate, oceanic crust of the Juan de Fuca plate. Then here comes up many times, this little chunk right here is actually continental crust, very thick crust of the Pacific plate, and that causes a continental collision zone. So this is a good reminder of thinking about the difference between oceanic and continental crust. Takeaway topics. The first one I didn't say much about, but the interior structure of the Earth is known from seismology by studying how seismic waves recorded by seismometers at the surface interact with the Earth's interior, kind of similar to how medical imaging works, of sending waves in through a medium to characterize its properties. We focus on 5 parts of the Earth: lithosphere, asthenosphere, mantle, outer core, inner core. The lithosphere is the rigid plate and is made up of crust and lithospheric mantle. The asthenosphere is a weak, yielding region under the plate that allows the plates to move more easily. The mantle is rock that moves slowly via mantle convection. The core is made up of iron, also nickel. It has a solid inner part and a liquid outer part. There are 2 types of crust, oceanic and continental. Oceanic crust is generally 5 to 10 kilometers thick. Continental crust is generally 30 to 50 kilometers thick. So for example, at subduction zones, it's going to be the site of oceanic crust subducting either beneath other oceanic plate or continental plate.